The Amish in Pennsylvania have a word for it. What's that? I said. Shunning. I was at Archie's. I had to talk to someone. Well, that's what's happening. The shunny, so to speak, has gotten himself in Dutch with the church, so he's excommunicated. The whole community is in on it. Unless he repents, nobody speaks to him for the rest of his life, not even his family. What? That's right, not even his family. What about his wife? Wife, kids, everybody. His pipe had gone out. He relit it with a stick match. I believe the idea is to drive him away, but some stay, continue working with the farm, having dinner. If he passes a salt to his wife, she ignores it. If the bishop had his way, the pigs and chickens would ignore him. It's as if he doesn't exist. I nodded. I know the feeling. We were on the back porch. I stared out at Senor Saguaro. He said, Does that happen to you when you're not with her? No, I said. At least I don't think so. But when I am with her, I feel like it's aimed at me too. A small pipe cloud left the corner of his mouth. He smiled sadly. Poor dolphin, caught in a tuna net. I picked up Barney, the Palestine rodent skull. I wondered if someone would be holding Cinnamon's head 60 million years from now. So what should I do? Archie waved his hand. Oh, well, that's the easy part. Stay away from her. Your problem's kaput. I sneered. Great advice. You know it's not that easy. He did know, of course, but he wanted me to say it. I told him about the Valentine, the night in her driveway, the walk in the desert. The question that came to mind then sounded silly, but it persisted. Do you believe in enchanted places? He took the pipe from his mouth and looked straight at me. Absolutely. I was confused. But you're a scientist, a man of science, a man of bones. You can't be up to your eyeballs in bones and not believe in enchanted places. I looked at Barney. I ran my fingertip along the hard line of his 2-inch jaw, rough like a cat's tongue. 60 million years in my hands. I looked at Archie. Why can't she be? He finished for me, like everybody else. He stood up and stepped down from the porch onto the desert. For his backyard, except for the shed where he kept his digging tools, was the desert. Nature did the landscaping. I put down Barney and joined him. We ambled towards Senor Saguaro. Not like everybody else, I said. Not exactly. Not totally. But Archie, I stopped. He stopped. I turned full face to him. My thoughts and feelings were a wild, conflicting jumble. After staring stupidly at him for a long time, I blurted, She cheers for the other team. Archie pulled the pipe from his mouth, as if to better digest my words. He raised one finger in the air. He nodded solemnly. Ah, yes. We resumed walking. We walked on past the tool shed, past Senor Saguaro. Occasionally, I picked up a stone and flung it toward the purple maricopas. Archie said, almost in a whisper, She's not easy to put into words, is she? I shook my head. An unusual girl, he said. Could see that from the first. And her parents as ordinary in a nice way as could be. How did this girl come to be? I used to ask myself. Sometimes I thought she should be teaching me. She seems to be in touch with something that the rest of us are missing. He looked at me. I nodded. He turned the mahogany bowl of his pipe upside down and rapped it with his knuckle. A small stream of ash spilled onto a thicket of dead mesquite. He pointed the pipe stem at me. You know, there's a place we all inhabit, but we don't think much about it. We're scarcely conscious of it, and it lasts for less than a minute a day. What's that? I said. It's in the morning for most of us. It's that time. Those few seconds when we're coming out of sleep, but we're not really awake yet. For those few seconds, We're something more primitive than we are about to become. We have just slept the sleep of our most distant ancestors, and something of them and their world still clings to us. For those few moments, we are uninformed, uncivilized. We are not the people we know as ourselves, but creatures more in tune with a tree than a keyboard. We are untitled, unnamed, natural, suspended between was and will be, the tadpole before the frog, the worm before the butterfly. We are, for a few brief moments, anything and everything we could be. And then he pulled out his pouch and repacked his pipe. Cherry scent flew. He struck a match. The pipe bowl, like some predator or seducer, drew down the flame. And then, we open our eyes, and the day is before us, and he snapped his fingers. We become ourselves. Like so many of Archie's words, they seem not to enter through my ears, but to settle on my skin. There to burrow like tiny eggs awaiting the rain of my maturity, when they would hatch and I, at last, would understand. We walked in silence. Yellow blooms had appeared on a cactus, and for some reason that made me incredibly sad. The purple of the mountains flowed like watercolor. They hate her, I said. He stopped. He looked intently at me. He turned me around and we headed back. He put his arm around my shoulder. Let's consult Senor Sagara. Shortly, we were standing before the derelict giant. I never understood how the Senor managed to convey a sense of dignity, majesty even, considering his stick, rickety, see-through skeleton and the ridiculous leathery crumble of hide about his foot, his fallen breeches. Archie always spoke to him with respectful formality, as to a judge or visiting dignitary. Good day, Senor Sagaro, he began. I believe you know my friend and charter member of the Loyal Order of the Stone Bone, Mr. Borlaug. He whispered an aside to me. I'm a little rusty, but I think I'll use Spanish now. He prefers it on delicate matters. He turned back to the cactus. Parece, Senor Borlaug, aquí es la víctima de un shunning de sus compañeros estudiantes en el liceo. El objeto principal de shunning es la enamorada del señor Borlaug, nuestra propia señorita niña estrella. Él está en búsqueda de preguntas. As Archie spoke, he looked up toward the owl hole. Now he turned back to me and whispered, I asked for questions. Questions, I whispered. What about answers? But he was turning from me, tilting his head toward the great cactus, his finger on his lips. Shh. His eyes closed. I waited. At last he nodded and turned back to me. The esteemed senor says there is only one question. What's that? I said. He says it all boils down to this, if I'm translating correctly. Whose affection do you value more, hers or the other's? The senor says everything will follow from that. I wasn't sure I understood the senor anymore, that I understood Archie half the time, but I said nothing, and I went home. In bed that night, as the moonlight reached high tide under my chin, I realized that in fact, I understood the question perfectly. I just didn't want to answer it. Twice a week, the results of the state basketball tournament were posted on the plywood Roadrunner in the courtyard. The surviving teams were into the sectionals now. Then would come the regionals, then the only two teams left, the big show, the Arizona State Championship. Glendale, the team who had lost to got bitter, mosaic attention on the Roadrunner with scores in the foot-high numerals as they continued to win and move through the tournament. Meanwhile, Stargirl was involved in a tournament of her own, the oratorical contest. As Micah High's winner, she qualified for the district talk-off, as the Times called it. It took place in the auditorium of Red Rock High School, and lo and behold, Stargirl won that too. Next stop was the state finals in Phoenix on the third Friday in April. In my homeroom, when the announcement came over the PA about Stargirl winning the district title, I was about to let out a cheer, but I caught myself. Several people booed. Getting ready for the finals, Stargirl practiced on me. Most often we went into the desert. She did not use notes, nor did her words seem memorized. Each time she gave the speech, it was different. She seemed to insert new material as it popped into her head. She matched her words so perfectly that the speech was not a speech at all, but one creature's voice in the wild, as natural as a raven's caw or a coyote's howl at midnight. I sat cross-legged on the ground. Cinnamon sat on me. We listened in rapture, and so I half believed. Did the tumbleweed and cacti, the desert, the mountains, all listening to the girl in the long falling skirt. What a shame, I thought, to pack her performance into a schedule and present it to rows of plush back seats in an auditorium. Once, incredibly, an elf owl landed atop a saguaro, not 10 feet from where she was speaking. It paused for a full minute before ducking into its hole. Of course, we did other things too. We walked, we talked, we rode bikes. Though I had my driver's license, I bought a cheap secondhand bicycle so I could ride with her. Sometimes she led the way, sometimes I did. Whenever we could, we rode side by side. She was bendable light. She shone around every corner of my day. She taught me to revel. She taught me to wonder. She taught me to laugh. My sense of humor had always measured up to everyone else's, but timid, introverted me, I showed it sparingly. I was a smiler. In her presence, I threw back my head and laughed out loud for the first time in my life. She saw things. I had not known there was so much to see. She was forever tugging my arm and saying, "Look." I would look around, seeing nothing. Where? She would point. There. In the beginning, I still could not see. She might be pointing to a doorway or a person or the sky, but such things went so common to my eyes, so undistinguished, that they would register as nothing. I walked in a gray world of nothings. So she would stop and point out the front door of the house we were passing was blue, and the last time we had passed it, it had been green. And that, as near as she could tell, someone who lived in the house painted the front door a different color several times a year. Or she would whisper to me that the old man sitting alone on the bench at the Tudor Village shopping center was holding his hearing aid in his hand, and he was smiling, and he wore a coat and a tie, as if he was going somewhere special, and pinned onto his lapel was a tiny American flag. Or she would kneel down and pull me down with her and show me the ants, 2 of them, lugging the lopped leg of a beetle 20 times their size across the sidewalk. As my 2 men, were they strong as ants, carry a full-grown tree from one end of the town to the other. After a while, I began to see better. When she said, "Look," and I followed her pointing finger, I saw. Eventually, it became a contest. Who would see first? When I finally did it, said, "Look," and pointed and tugged her sleeve. I was proud as a first grader with a star on his paper. And there was more to her seeing than that. What she saw, she felt. Her eyes went straight to her heart. The old man on the bench, for example, made her cry. The lumberjack ants made her laugh. The door of many colors put her in such a state of curiosity that I had to drag her away. She felt she could not proceed with her life until she knocked on such a door. She told me how she would run the Mika Times if she were the editor. Crime would be on page 10, ants and old men and painted doors on page 1. She made up headlines. Ants haul monster load across vast barren walk. Mystery smile, old man. Nods off at the Tudor village. Door begs, knock me. I told her I wanted to be a TV director. She said she wanted to be a silver lunch truck driver. Huh? I said. You know, she said. People work all morning and then it's 12 o'clock. The secretaries in the offices walk out the door. The construction workers put down their hard hats and hammers, and everybody's hungry, and they look up and there I am. No matter where they are, no matter where they work, I'm here. I have a whole fleet of silver lunch trucks. They go everywhere. Let lunch come to you. That's my slogan. Just seeing my silver lunch truck makes them happy. She described how she would roll up the side panels and everyone would practically faint at the cloud of wonderful smells. Hot food, cold food, Chinese, Italian. You name it, even a salad bar. They can't believe how much food I fit into my truck, no matter where you are, out in the desert, the mountains, even down in the mines. If you want my silver lunch service, I get it to you. I find a way. I tagged along on missions. One day she bought a small plant, an African violet in a plastic pot on sale for 99 cents at a drugstore. Who's that for? I asked her. I'm not exactly sure, she said. I just know that someone at an address at Marion Drive is in the hospital for surgery, so I thought whoever's back home could use a little cheering up. How do you know this stuff? I said. She gave me a mischievous grin. I have my ways. We went to the house on Marion Drive. She reached into the saddle pack behind her bicycle seat. She pulled out a handful of ribbons. She chose a pale violet one that matched the color of the tiny blossoms and stuffed the remaining ribbons back into the seat pack. She tied the violet ribbon around the pot. I held her bike while she set the plant by the front door. Riding away, I said, "Why don't you leave a card or something with your name on it?" The question surprised her. Why should I? Her question surprised me. Well, I don't know. It's just the way people do things. They expect it. They get a gift. They expect to know where it came from. Is that important? Yeah, I guess. I never finished that thought. My tires shuddered as I slammed my bike to a halt. She stopped ahead of me. She backed up. She stared. Leo, what is it? I wagged my head. I grinned. I pointed to her. It was you. Me what? 2 years ago, my birthday, I found a package on my front step. A porcupine necktie. I never found out who gave it to me. She walked her bike alongside mine. She grinned. A mystery. Where did you find it? I said. I didn't. I had my mother make it. She didn't seem to want to dwell on the subject. She started pedaling and we continued on our way. Where were we? She said. Getting credit, I said. What about it? Well, it's nice to get credit. The spokes of her rear wheel spun behind the curtain of her long skirt. She looked like a photograph from 100 years ago. She turned her wide eyes on me. Is it? She said.